जमी कंस पर, त्यो मलेच्छ वंश पर, शेर शिवराज है. That's Chatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. And these are lines of Mahakavi Bhushan. They've inspired a generation. They've inspired generations of warriors. They've inspired generations of Indians. Chatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. What does Chatrapati Shivaji Maharaj mean for people like you and I, for India? The founder of the Hindvi Swaraj, the founder of a modern Indian state. Let me bring some of the finest voices on Chatrapati Shivaji Maharaj on stage to talk about what Chatrapati Shivaji Maharaj means for us. Let me invite on stage Vaibhav Purandare, author of Shivaji, India's great warrior king. Let me also take this opportunity to invite Manu Pillai, author and historian. Manu, welcome on stage. And Dr. Amol Kolhe, Member of Parliament, Lok Sabha, actor and doctor. Gentlemen, welcome. When we talk about Chatrapati Shivaji Maharaj and Vaibhav, let me begin by asking you, Chatrapati Shivaji, the first image that comes to your mind, the founder of a modern Indian state, the founder of a modern Indian Navy?
Chatrapati Shivaji is a singular figure in the history of India, Gaurav, and especially in the early modern history of India. Imagine an individual taking on an empire. It's hardly a contest. Imagine that the empire that he's taking on is one of the world's biggest and covers 1/5 of the world's land surface. And it's a completely hopeless situation. Yet, this man from one corner of the Western Deccan takes on the Mughal Empire when it's at the height of its glory under Emperor Aurangzeb. And not only establishes his own independent sovereign state, but sows the seeds of the destruction of the Mughal Empire. He fashions a template of governance which is his own. He frames policies for responsible and responsive governance, rejigs completely the civilian, political, and revenue administration, and he gives robust expression, above all, to values of religious plurality, values which Aurangzeb is actively and aggressively working against. So he's a pivotal figure, and he's certainly the progenitor of the Indian Navy, Gaurav.
The insignia of the Indian Navy has been taken from Chatrapati Shivaji Maharaj's Navy. And how many people at that time knew? Yes, we've had a Chola Navy, Manu, but why is it that the credit now is given to Chatrapati Shivaji Maharaj? Is this politics or is there more to it?
Well, can you hear me? Yeah, there's always politics because, he's such a fascinating figure, and each political ideology can find something in him that they can appropriate. And this isn't a contemporary thing necessarily. If you look at the 19th century, take somebody like Jyotiba Phule. He sees Shivaji as a leader of peasants, somebody who's fighting for the people. And he actively plays down the Brahmin influence. Take somebody like Eknath, Tanaji, and he does the opposite. He says that it was actually Shivaji's Brahmin mentor, Dadoji Kondev, who was the one energizing Shivaji's activities. When Tilak comes into the picture, he's not interested necessarily in social reform in the same way as Phule is. He says, let's look at him as somebody fighting imperialism because we need to fight colonialism. So different groups at different times end up appropriating different sides of Shivaji. Ultimately, it's all one Chatrapati. But because he's a king, he's done so many things that, everybody picks and chooses what they want, which continues even now. There's all kinds of debates as a result of that. But yes, I think on the naval principle, Vaibhav's covered that in his book as well. It's, let's say, a more recent example than the Cholas. There's greater evidence. The colonial period had already started. The Portuguese were already in the picture. Therefore, what he achieved attains a certain salience that perhaps we don't associate with the Cholas that easily.
Dr. Kolhe, you are an actor, you're a political leader, you're a doctor. For you, Chatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, is it about politics? Because as an actor, you've played the Chatrapati. What does he mean to you?
See, there is one fact about Chatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. When you consider the great 17s of the world, if you consider the great 17s, Chatrapati Shivaji Maharaj stands out to be the only king who was not born as a king, who never betrayed anyone to become a king. He sworn himself as a king, and when he passed away, till that time he was a king. If you apply this criteria, these 4 criteria, none of the great 17s stand on this criteria in front of Chatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. And as Vaibhavji said, it's not only a kingdom. And as Manuji rightfully pointed out, the navy, this is not only building a navy, this is not only protecting a nation, this is a religious revolution. Because in that era, समुद्र पर्यटन ये निषिद्ध माना गया था हिंदू धर्म में. That's why in 7th century Cholas had their navy, and then for 1000 years, for 10 centuries, none of the Hindu king could build a strong navy, and that was the reason why Portuguese, Dutch, British, Arabs, everybody was conquering our country. And Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj was the king who realized this fact, and he built his own navy after 1000 years. So he becomes a visionary, he was a revolutionary, और एक बहुत बड़ी बात है मेरे लिए छत्रपति शिवाजी महाराज कि धर्म सत्ता और राज सत्ता. There is always a clash between religious authority and political authority. Chatrapati Shivaji Maharaj set up an example in this land that religious authority should not overpower political authority. Instead, both should work hand in hand for the well-being of people. And most importantly, from political point of view, he was the first person जिन्होंने अपने किंगडम को अपना नाम नहीं दिया. It was रयतेचं राज्य. It was not Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj's empire. It was not Bhosla empire. It was not Maratha empire. It was Swaraj. It was रयतेचं Raj. So I feel the foundation of democracy can be seen in Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj's Swaraj.
You know, when you talk about Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, was he way ahead of his times? Of course, the founder of a Hindvi Swaraj, a Hindu kingdom at a time when Aurangzeb or his part, the Mughal Empire, was at its peak. But at the same time, when we talk about Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj setting up a navy from scratch, 50 warships, but hundreds of trade ships apparently, am I right?
Yeah, close to 700 trading vessels that he had. Now, it's astonishing. There's been a lot of comparison between the Chola Navy and Shivaji's Navy. Now, there is a difference here. There's a significant difference, and there's a reason that Chhatrapati Shivaji stands out in this respect. Now, the Cholas were undoubtedly great. They were warriors, they were conquerors, they were kings. They went all the way to Southeast Asia. But after the Chola Empire disintegrates in the 1250s, for 500 years, like Dr. Kolhe pointed out, neither the Mughal Empire, nor the Bahmani kingdoms, nor the Nizam Shahi, nor the Adil Shahi, nor the Qutub Shahi, nobody in this land recognizes the significance of the coastline in terms of both defense and trade. Chhatrapati Shivaji is alone among his contemporaries to recognize that significance. And astonishingly, when he starts his political career, India's vast coastline is dominated by 4 foreign powers. The British, the Portuguese who've come and started ruling Goa from 1510 onwards, the French and the Dutch. And there are the African Siddhis as well. And not a single Indian ruler has thought of building a navy. And at the age of 28 and 29, he starts building his navy from scratch. He's got absolutely no technology to build a navy. So he borrows technology from the British and from the Portuguese. And there are letters from the Mughal emperor to the British officials in Western India saying, your people are building Shivaji's navy. Are you cooperating or collaborating with Shivaji? And they are saying, no. And it's all there in the records that no, but he's paying up engineers. He's taking away our engineers and taking the help of the technology they have to build his own navy. This activity of his begins in 58-59 in Kalyan, Bhiwandi, Thane district along the western coastal belt. And by the year 1674, by the time he's 44 years old and he's crowned as an independent king, as a Chatrapati, as the bearer of the royal umbrella, he has 50 vessels which are into combat. They are of different quality, they are varying quality rather. Some are swift moving vessels in the sea, some are really heavy vessels which can carry cannon and other stuff like that. And there are close to 700 trading vessels that he sends out to countries even in Western Asia to carry out trade. So he's singular again in this respect. And that is the difference between him and the Cholas. Also about the Cholas, one thing we need to keep in mind is the Cholas have had an intrinsic awareness about the importance of the waters, because their kingdom was born in a river valley. So they had that inner awareness. Chatrapati Shivaji starts out in the mountains in the Deccan, and he slowly, systematically starts moving towards the sea because he sees the importance of the sea when nobody else has recognized it. And eventually he builds his kingdom, Raigad, along the Konkan coastline.
And something that then Kanhoji Angre subsequently
Takes
builds,
forward.
that the Indian Navy still credits Kanhoji Angre as its first admiral. Manu, but are political parties today, in your view, trying to usurp the Chhatrapati's legacy to suit their political purposes? Is that the impression? And then as a historian or a writer, are there then some no-go areas and landmines?
Well, the thing is, he is an icon, right? And the thing is, this gentleman has packed so much activity into his life. It wasn't a particularly long life. Think of his life arc itself, right? He's born in a time of famine. He's born in a time when kingdoms around him are collapsing and the invasion of the Deccan is taking place. There's poverty everywhere. In great measure, he's raised by his mother because his father's fighting in the south. So he's raised by a woman who sort of, and all this is the popular history, right? It's his mother who energizes something in him to go out and do something special. He starts working from within the frame and within the debris of the old system, but then creates something new. He also faces a lot of personal challenges. There's illness towards the end. There seems to be domestic discord towards the end. His son defects briefly. So every aspect of his life has drama, it has valor, it has vision, it has a whole series of things happening. So it's not surprising that Indians from the colonial period especially, of course his story was well known before that, decided to appropriate him as an icon. First as a regional icon, and then quickly he became a national icon because the ingredients were all there. Now the result is that in post-independence India, again political parties end up choosing different sides of it. Some people say he was a secular figure, except that secularism wasn't a feature or a characteristic or a value as such in his time. Pluralism might be the correct word, but not necessarily modern secularism as we know it. Others say that he was a protector of the Hindus, which is true if you look at his kingly narrative. Once he's crowned Chatrapati, and in the Shiva Bharata, for example, he does talk about wiping out nature dharma. He does talking about Hindavi Swaraj and themes like that. But all the same, if you look at his own father's name, his uncle's name, they were named after a Muslim Sufi saint called Shah Sharif. So the pluralism is there, but his kingly narrative also gives some wind in the sails of political Hinduism. So different parties using him in different ways or using his memory in different ways is in a sense only natural, because he provides that space. But I think people would be better to look at the entire picture and understand that this was a very complicated individual, a fascinating human being, and certainly a king who soars above most of his contemporaries from that time.
Dr. Kolhe, since you're also a political leader and you're an actor who's played Chhatrapati Shivaji, are there no-go areas? Are there areas that you wouldn't want to delve into even if you wanted to?
It's actually individual choice. Talking about
or your voters' choice?
Talking about myself, I try to put Chatrapati Shivaji Maharaj more in analytical way. I always try to see which is the need of the hour. कि छत्रपति शिवाजी महाराज सिर्फ सर पर लेकर नाचने की बात नहीं है, वो उनकी वैल्यूज समझने की बात है. For political things, when you hail छत्रपति शिवाजी महाराज, जब आप जय शिवराय बोलते हो, जब आप छत्रपति शिवाजी महाराज की जय बोलते हो, तो along with that जय जयकार, some responsibility also comes to you. There are many kingdoms which might be bigger than Chatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, which might be wealthier than Chatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. But if we try to understand why still Chatrapati Shivaji Maharaj is national icon or is dear to us, is our pride, I find that the moral values, the strong moral ground Chatrapati Shivaji Maharaj Swaraj had, that is the reason. And yes, for any political party, before hailing Chatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, they have to introspect about that moral ground. For personally, as you say, Chatrapati Shivaji Maharaj is an ideal example of जिसे हम आसक्ति और विरक्ति कहते हैं. So इतना बड़ा empire खड़ा करने के बाद भी he could say idam na mama, हे माझं नाही. It's up to everyone how he practices Chatrapati Shivaji Maharaj in his own life. Like I'm an MP, I'm member of parliament. We are entitled to get 36 business class travels during parliament. I practice Chatrapati Shivaji Maharaj in a manner that I haven't traveled by business class. I don't travel by business class. I don't avail that facility. Because this is a practice of asakti and virakti. I don't take police guard. I don't take security. क्योंकि अगर रयतेचं राज्य, रयतेचं स्वराज्य, ये अगर आप मानते हो, तो why should be afraid of your own people? So this is, I feel, any political party or any political person can practice the values taught or laid down in this land by Chatrapati Shivaji Maharaj as per his own vision.
And there's so much that he did that that is not very well known, because some may want to see him as yes, he is the founder of the Hinduvi Swaraj, he is a Hindu king, but how many people know that two of his admirals were actually Muslims, Ibrahim Khan Gardi, or there were others who were very close to him, and he always ensured, if I remember reading correctly, that the Quran must be respected, women must be respected. He made that very clear. Followed it.
Yeah. Gaurav, I believe that Chhatrapati Shivaji was out to create essentially a Hindu polity. I agree with Manu that the word secularism does not really apply. It's a Hindu polity which is broadly inclusive in nature and does not discriminate between people of different faiths. And it's a deeply humanistic philosophy, you know, based on the teachings of the Bhakti saint poets of Maharashtra and of the Deccan. You look at his sense of pluralism, and Khafi Khan, one of his worst critics, who at one point in time calls him a hell dog, says in writing that Shivaji had given express instructions to his soldiers that
as a Gau Brahman Pratipalak, or he's seen as someone whose coronation led to an issue being raised at that point of time. When it was written about in books, it had to be removed from those books.
You know, there's the famous James Lane episode, for example, which I think boils down to one sentence in his book, which was controversial. Now, you take that sentence, I'm not going to talk about it, but it was a lewd remark about his parents. And the thing is, you zoom out and you see that lots of historical figures in India, there are similar stories that people have concocted about them. And you realize that, hold on, this is just a way to, in a sense, dilute the value of the person. And some groups within Indian society have also tried this. From Adi Shankaracharya onwards to Mahatma Ayankali in Kerala, you have similar stories. So then, you know, even talking about that upsets people, and that the archives in Pune, the Bhandarkar Institute was attacked and so on, which was unfortunate because, you know, they had nothing to do with it. Then there's the fact that sometimes we are not comfortable talking about the historical evolution of the icon. The icon did not come fully ready-made to us in the 20th century. Some people looked at it, picked out certain things and then celebrated that. You know, for example, in the 1880s, it was found that Chatrapati's Samadhi in Raigad was in a state of complete disrepair. And I think it was Ranade who first made the effort to try and get something done. And the Bombay government allotted 4 rupees. 10 years later, Tilak takes it over and he has this huge newspaper campaign and people donate 15,000 rupees altogether, ordinary people. But the Maratha princes of the time actually don't donate large sums of money, including the Chatrapati's own descendant. Because they're actually donating to education, they're donating to these other sanस्थas that are there, and they don't really see this necessarily as a very important thing. There's of course again that Brahmin Maratha politics to it, because Tilak and the Congress is dominated by Brahmins, so that comes into the picture. Sometimes when people talk about these processes in that colonial period, it can become a bit sensitive. But I think with a bit of maturity, we can talk about it. It's not such a big deal.
You know, considering when people talk about Napoleon or when they talk about others, Chatrapati Shivaji, Dr. Kolhe was huge. But is he at times politically reduced to just being, you know, a caste figure or a regional figure for regional politics? And that needs to be avoided, isn't it, sir?
Yes, I totally agree with that. He should not be restricted or he should not be reduced to only caste or only region. It's Chatrapati Shivaji Maharaj is much beyond that, but it lies right from the educational point of view. We are not ready to go analytically towards any of our great figures of the nation. So similarly, if you apply like management principles to Chatrapati Shivaji Maharaj stands out very tall with SWOT analysis, with leadership skills, everything. If you apply social engineering principles to Chatrapati Shivaji Maharaj Ashtapradhan Mandal, the ministry, is an ideal example of social engineering in that era. The people from different castes, according to their gene pool specialities, were collected together and they were motivated towards a very larger goal. So these things are deficient in REA, but we look at history as only pride. We don't look at history as an analytical view. तो एक बहुत simple बात होती है कि Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, when Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj was born, is our first question to answer in our schools. Our schools don't teach कि what values of Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj you should inculcate in your life. हमारी value, हमारा ये आता है छत्रपति शिवाजी महाराज के गुरु कौन थे, और इस पे हम लोग लड़ना शुरू करते हैं, लेकिन हम लोग ये वैल्यू नहीं बताना चाहते कि छत्रपति शिवाजी महाराज इज एन आइडियल एग्जांपल ऑफ adaptation to nature, adaptation to society, adaptation to the social needs. और ये वैल्यूज अगर सामने आए तो डेफिनेटली इट्स नॉट ओनली पॉलिटिकल थिंग, इट्स आवर माइंडसेट ऑफ एवरी इंडियन, नॉट जस्ट टू अडोर बट टू एनालाइज एंड इनकलकेट.
Absolutely. And आपने अष्ट प्रधान मंडली का जिक्र किया. That was an era, Vaibhav, when everyone was talking about Persian names and Persian seals to sound really big. Didn't Chhatrapati make that big switch? We are talking about decolonization in 2022. Chhatrapati Shivaji did it in his times with the Sanskrit seal and a Sanskrit name.
That's remarkable because the royal insignia of Chatrapati Shivaji's father and his mother was in Persian. The insignias of all the Hindu Rajas of the south at the time, those who still existed in the Persianate age, we can correctly call it the Persianate age, were in Persian. And those Rajas also used to call themselves the Sultans after the Sultanates. But Chatrapati Shivaji, again at the age of 16, brings out his own insignia, which is not in Persian, unlike his parents' insignia. It's in Sanskrit. Then, at the time of his coronation in 1674, when he forms his Ashtapradhan or Council of Ministers, he tells his officials to create an altogether new dictionary which will replace the Persian terms with Sanskrit words for names of ministers, for titles and designations given to officials and all of that. Remarkably, one of his big lieutenants, Netaji Palkar, defects and goes to Aurangzeb. He spends 10 years in the northwest as Muhammad Quli Khan. And he comes back to Shivaji, disappointed with Aurangzeb's reign, his repression of Hindus and all of that. And Shivaji reconverts him to the Hindu faith. He also rebuilds the Saptakoteshwar temple, which the Portuguese have destroyed in Goa. So he will not allow his own cultural, social and civilizational identity to be obliterated. And at the same time, he will be inclusive and highly tolerant of other communities and respect other faiths and their holy books as well. During his raid of Surat, his first raid of Surat, he actually gives instructions to his soldiers not to touch the church of the French missionaries there. And he asks his soldiers to protect that church because he believes those people are doing good work there.
So much to learn, so much to imbibe and emulate. I've run out of time on this part of the discussion, but for joining me here on this India Today Conclave special, gentlemen, many thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If I could just request Dinesh Bhatia to join us on stage, the Group CEO of India Today Group, to thank our panelists. Also a reminder that you can buy Vaibhav Purandare and Manu Pillai's books and get them signed at the Author's Corner, that's just opposite the all-day Conclave Cafe. Gentlemen, thank you. And Gaurav, do stay with us.